Hello students, in this video we are going to discuss the structure of DNA, its replication, the process of making RNA from DNA, the genetic code, synthesis of proteins and all those details. First we begin with the structure of DNA. DNA deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid are the two types of nucleic acids present in living organisms. And DNA is a genetic material in most of the organisms, in all eukaryotes. RNA is the genetic material in some viruses. We'll study the structure of DNA first. Each DNA nucleotide is made up of a number of nucleotides. Each nucleotide is made of three components: a pentose sugar, a nitrogen base, and phosphoric acid or phosphate group. These are the three components. And the first one is a pentose sugar. RNA contains the pentose sugar, ribose sugar, and DNA contains deoxyribose sugar. The second component is the nitrogenous base. There are two categories of nitrogen bases, the purines and pyrimidines. Purines have two rings in their structure. Adenine and guanine are the purines. Then pyrimidines have one ring in their structure, single ringed structure they have. Cytosine, thymine and uracil are the pyrimidine bases. Purines are double ringed structures, adenine and guanine, and pyrimidines are single ring in their structure. Then the third component, that is the phosphoric acid, which contains a phosphate group, and the phosphate group combines two nucleotides together by formation of a phosphodiester bond. So the phosphate group is united to the nucleotide by phosphodiester bond. DNA is the genetic material or the hereditary material, and it contains the genetic information, and it is the most important constituent of a chromosome. The length of a DNA is defined by the number of nucleotides it has, and a pair of nucleotides is called as the base pairs, is also defined in number of base pairs. Watson and Crick they proposed the structure of DNA. DNA molecule, which is consisting of two polynucleotide chains, and these two chains form a double helical structure, a spiral structure, and these two chains are anti-parallel. If one chain has polarity 5 dash to the 3 dash, the other one will have 3 dash to 5 dash. The sugar phosphate units form the backbone, and the nitrogenous base form the center. Means the double helical structure of the DNA can be compared to a staircase. The two sides railings are actually the the two chains of nucleotides, and these two chains are connected by the nitrogen base pairs, which are actually the stairs or the steps of the staircase. Both the strands are joined together by weak hydrogen bonds present between the nitrogenous base. Now, pairing between the nitrogenous bases is such that adenine will pair with thymine, and between them there will be double bond two hydrogen bonds are there, and cytosine will be pairing with guanine, and there are always three hydrogen bonds between cytosine and guanine. So such a base pairing is called complementary pairing. Now, the pairing is always between a purine and a pyrimidine, not with a purine and purine or pyrimidine and pyrimidine. It is always with purine with pyrimidine. And the double helix takes a complete turn after 3.4 nanometers, and there are 10 base pairs in a complete turn. So the width of the DNA molecule is 0.2 nanometers, and the nucleotides in the helix are joined by the phosphodiester bond. So this structure was given by Watson and Crick. And for making this double helical structure, they had taken the information which was collected by Maurice Wilkins and Rosalind Franklin. They had studied the DNA with X-ray diffraction method, and they collected certain data which were used by James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953 to propose the double helical model structure of the DNA. So the pairing between the two strands of polynucleotide chains is the hallmark of their double helical structure. And this double helical structure of DNA was also due to Erwin Chargaff. He also proposed the double stranded DNA, and he says the ratio between adenine and thymine and guanine and cytosine are constant and are equal ones and equals 1. So they are the adenine will bond with thymine and cytosine will bond with guanine, and the ratios between adenine, thymine and GC are constant and they equal 1. This base pairing quality is a unique property of the polynucleotide chains, and they are said to be complementary to each other. Therefore, the sequences of bases in one strand is known, then the sequence in the other strand can be predicted because the strands are complementary to each other. So there are the salient features of the double helical structure of DNA. It is made of two polynucleotide chains, which already explained. I am just revising. Where the backbone is by the sugar and the phosphate, and the nitrogen bases are in between the two strands. The two chains have antiparallel polarity. It means one chain has polarity 5' to the 3', and the other will have 3' to the 5'. The bases in two strands are paired through hydrogen bonds, A to T with double bonds and G with C triple bonds. And the two chains are coiled in a right-handed fashion. So that is all about the double helical structure of the DNA. So the details are given again here. Adenine is one strand pairs with thymine of another strand by two hydrogen bonds and vice versa. You can see the DNA structure. Two strands are connected through the nitrogen base pairs, and then the double helical nature of the DNA, how the double helix is formed. And the measurements are also given there. More detailed study of the DNA. Now, Watson and Crick uh, found out that there is the central dogma, that is the flow of information, genetic information from the DNA to the protein is called as the central dogma, DNA to the messenger RNA to the protein, which is considered as the central dogma. But in some viruses, the flow information is in the reverse direction, that is from RNA to the DNA, because the viruses, they do not have DNA, so they have only RNA, so the reverse direction, reverse transcription is possible. It is really amazing to see that such long polymers of the DNA is packed in a nucleus. That means in human beings there are 46 chromosomes, and all the DNA which is there of these 46 chromosomes are coiled and placed in a small nucleus. So how it is done? So that is explained by the packaging of DNA. We'll see the packaging of DNA in prokaryotes first. Prokaryotes, they do not have a definite nucleus, but the DNA is not just scattered throughout their cell, but the DNA is held together with some proteins in a particular region which is called as the nucleoid. And the DNA nucleoid is organized in large loops which are held by the proteins. And in eukaryotes, the organization is much more complex. There is a set of positively charged basic proteins which are called as the histones. They are basic proteins, positively charged ones. The charge of the protein is depending on the presence of the type of amino acid with the charged side chains. The histones are rich in basic amino acid units like lysine and arginine. And then histones are organized to form a group of 8 molecules called the histone octamer. Histone octamer. Here in this figure you can see the histone octamer. And the negatively charged DNA is wrapped around the positively charged histone octamer and forming a structure which is called as the nucleosome. And a typical nucleosome contains 200 base pairs of the DNA helix. Now, a number of nucleosomes together forming a structure which is called the chromatin. A number of nucleosomes together forming the chromatin. Chromatin is visible as thread-like stained or colored bodies in the nucleus when you study the nucleus. And the nucleosomes in the chromatin are visible as beads on a string when see under the electron microscope. Beads on a string. So the histones, histone octamer, which is wrapped around by the the negatively charged DNA, forming the nucleosome. Sorry. Many nucleosomes together forming a chromatin, and chromatin gets arranged as beads on a string and forming the chromosome. The beads on string structure in chromatin is packaged to form the chromatin fibers, which are further coiled and condensed at the metaphase stage of the cell division. So, at this stage, what we see is the coiled chromatin fibers. Now, the packaging of chromatin requires additional set of proteins, which are collectively called as non-histone chromosomal proteins, NHC, non-histone chromosomal proteins. And a chromosome in a single strand of DNA helix is packed together. Now, in a typical nucleus, some region of the chromatin is loosely packed, and hence they get stained very lightly. So, this loosely packed chromatin is called as euchromatin. And there are areas where you will find very darkly stained regions, which are densely packed chromatin, so which is called as the heterochromatin. And the euchromatin is transcriptionally very active, which actively participate in the transcription, but the heterochromatin is inactive. It remains passive during the transcription. Although Mendel proposed the principles of inheritance in 1865, and Miescher discovered nuclein at the same time, but it took long to prove that what acts as a genetic material. Though it was known for a long time that chromosomes carry genetic information, it was still not clear whether DNA or the proteins of the chromosomes were the genetic material. The concept of DNA being the genetic material and not the protein, but the DNA was the genetic material. This was confirmed much later by the experiments conducted by Frederick Griffith, a British bacteriologist. In 1928, he conducted a series of experiments with bacteria, the Diplococcus pneumoniae, which causes the disease pneumonia in mammals. And for that he grew this bacteria in the culture plates, and he found that they produce two types of colonies. The S strain bacteria produce capsule, and which is the pathogenic ones, and the R strain, which are formed of rough colonies, and they did not have the coating, so the surface was rough and the colony appeared very rough. But the S strain, they formed smooth shiny colonies because of the mucus coat on their surface. And he conducted a series of experiments with these two strains of the bacteria. He injected the S strain bacteria into mice. The mice developed pneumonia and died. Then he found the R strain. He injected into the mice, and the mice did not get the disease, but they survived. Then he injected the heat-killed S strain. S strain was causing the disease in the mice, so he heat-killed the smooth strain of bacteria and then injected into the mice, and he found them living. The mouse lived. And then he injected a mixture of the heat-killed S strain along with the live R strain. Heat-killed S strain is injected along with the live R strain, and the mouse suffered pneumonia and died. And he recovered live S bacteria from the dead mice. So in the last experiment, Griffith injected heat-killed S cells with live R cells, and he found that the mouse developed pneumonia. And from this experiment, he concluded that there was something which transformed the R strain into the virulent ones or disease-causing ones. So that was due to the presence of the heat-killed S cells. So the heat-killed S cells contained something which transformed the R cells into live S cells. So this enabled the R strain to synthesize in a smooth polysaccharide coat and become virulent. So the R strain got transformed into S strain because of the presence of the heat-killed version of the S strain. And the R cells that were transformed into S cells continued as S cells only. The principle behind these transformations was not known until 1944, when Oswald Avery, Colin MacLeod and Maclean McCarthy, they worked to determine the biochemical components, biochemical nature of the transforming principle of Griffith's experiment. So for that they purified the biochemicals, the proteins, DNA and RNA from the heat-killed S cells, S strains of the pneumonia bacteria, and to see which ones could transform live R cells into the S cells. And they discovered that DNA alone from the S bacteria caused the R bacteria becoming transformed. They also discovered that protein digesting enzymes, the proteases, and RNA digesting enzymes, the RNases, did not affect the transformation. So the transforming substances were not the protein or the RNA. Then they used DNase enzyme to digest the DNA part, and they found that this inhibited the transformation. So it suggested that the DNA caused the transformation. Okay, so it clearly showed their work of Avery, MacLeod and McCarthy's work proved that it was the DNA component alone of the heat-killed S bacteria that was transforming live R bacteria into the live S bacteria. This experiment demonstrated that DNA can be transferred from one organism to another, and it continues to express its genetic qualities. So it indicated that DNA is a genetic material and it is not destroyed by killing the cells by heat treatment. But all the biologists were not convinced by this, but a number of biologists were convinced by the above experiment. The most conclusive proof that DNA is the hereditary material came from a series of experiments performed by Alfred Hershey and Martha Chase in 1952. They have worked with the bacteria called bacteriophage. These bacteriophages are very simple structures which they have an outer protein coat and an inner core of a DNA molecule. Hershey and Chase used the bacteriophage T2 for their experiments, and they worked to discover whether it was the protein or the DNA from the viruses that entered the T2 virus. This T2 virus attacks the bacteria Escherichia coli, which is present in the colon. Escherichia coli is the colon bacteria. And they made two different preparations of the T2 phages, one containing S35 in the protein called sulfur 35, an isotope of the sulfur, and the other containing P32 in the DNA molecule. Two different preparations of T2 phages, one with the S35 in the protein coat and the other containing P32 in the DNA molecule. P phosphate group is there in the DNA molecule, so that is made radioactive. S is there in the protein part, which is made radioactive in one group. Now, to prepare T2 phages containing S35 and P32, they made the T2 phages infect E. coli growing in specific media. Okay, growing in medium containing S35, which is a radioactive sulfur. So there, the E. coli, the T2 phage in the E. coli in medium containing radioactive isotope of sulfur, there the radioactive sulfur got incorporated into the protein coat, and in the next one, that is the T2 phages infected with the medium was given P32 radioactive phosphorus in the medium. So the radioactive phosphorus is incorporated into the DNA of the E. coli. So T2 phage in the E. coli in the medium. So the T2 phage will have the DNA which is radioactive. So in the first case it was the protein coat which was made radioactive, and in the second it was the DNA which was made radioactive. Now these radioactive phages incorporated with S35 and P32 were made to infect the culture of non-radioactive E. coli. And now after some time, the T2 phages, they get attached and injected their DNA, but before they could multiply and form new phages, the E. coli were agitated in a blender. So that is artificially done. Mixing is done. Tissue culture, it is done that way. It loosened and detached the virus protein coats from the surface of the bacteria, and the whole mixture consisting of viral coats and the infected bacteria was put in a high speed centrifuge, and the infected bacterial cells settled at the bottom of the tube, and the lighter viral coats remained suspended in the supernatant fluid, and the radioactive sulfur S35 was confined to the supernatant, which contained only the protein part. So the radioactive phosphorus P32 was found inside the infected bacterial cells settled at the bottom of the tube. So from this they concluded the bacteria that were infected with the viruses which had the radioactive proteins were not radioactive. So this indicated that the protein did not enter the bacteria from the virus, but it entered. It became clear that only the phage DNA which entered the bacterial cell. So from the phage, only the DNA enters. So which is only having the genetic material which process. So DNA alone is responsible for the synthesis of new viruses inside the bacterial cells. So they announced that the DNA, not the protein, is the hereditary material. This is the figure for that. The protein codes of the phages are radioactively labeled, and when the phages infect the bacteria with the genetic material, no radioactivity enters the cell. And in the second case, DNA of the phage is radioactively labeled. So phages infect the bacteria with the genetic material and the radioactivity enters the cell. So by this experiment they concluded that DNA is the infecting agent that made the bacteria radioactive. So hence DNA is the genetic material, not the protein. For a molecule to act as a genetic material, it must be able to fulfill certain functions. Like it should be able to generate its replica. Replication is possible with the DNA. Then these molecules are chemically and structurally stable ones, and they should provide slow changes. Mutations are possible with them. Then they should be able to express itself in the form of the Mendelian characters, which are inherited from generation to the next. Proteins do not fulfill the criteria, so hence they are not the genetic material. Only RNA and DNA fill these criteria and they are the genetic material.